Okay, let's talk about resuscitation attempts and DNRs. As we all know, we all have laws and regulations and rules regarding do not resuscitate orders that requires us to physically see the order and verify its legitimacy. If a patient is alive, a valid DNR order would not prevent you from assessing said patient and administering basic care. So in your book, there's an interesting, on page 152, there is a very interesting scenario to consider. You're leaving the emergency room in your ambulance when an approximately 50-year-old woman jumps out of a window on the third floor of the hospital and lands on the road in front of you. Your partner stops the vehicle, you get out your equipment, begin assessment and management of the patient. As you reach her, a breathless aide runs out to the door and says, "Do not do anything. She's got a DNR order." How does this affect how you, the care that you administer? You have virtually no time to think about what to do for this woman who is bleeding on the street and appears unresponsive. Our instincts should say, treat her now and let the hospital sort things out later if she survives. In this case, your instincts are probably steering you in the right direction for a number of reasons. First off, every state that has laws or rules regarding do not resuscitate orders requires you to see the order and verify that it's legitimate in some manner. In this case, you don't have access to it, so how can you verify it's legitimate? That just because an aide tells you that they have a DNR order does not mean that you don't do anything for her. So you're in no legal obligation to withhold anything from this woman. There is no physical order in front of you that you can read. If the patient is alive, and according to the scenario she appears to be, even a valid DNR order would not prevent you from assessing the patient and administering basic care, including comfort care. Third, the principle of non-malfeasance says, do no harm. Refraining from helping her might cause irreversible harm, including perhaps death. The principles of beneficence and malfeasance both urge you to help the patient. The potential conflict arises when you consider autonomy. The competent patient of legal age has the right to determine what happens to his or her own body. You have some reason to believe that she has determined that she does not wish to resuscitation efforts if her heart stops. But in this case, the accuracy of this information cannot be verified. You don't have it in front of you. The way they wrote this is how it concludes. So you've treated her. You're going to treat her. Considering the lack of verifiable information and the severe time limitations you're facing, you and your partner go ahead and assess the patient. You find that she responds to verbal stimuli by moaning. Her airway is open. Ventilations are adequate. She has several lacerations and apparent fractures. Because you are literally in front of the hospital, you limit your interventions to quick immobilization on a spine board with bleeding control and oxygen mask. You rapidly move her to the emergency department and turn her over to the team there. Later, you discover that she had originally been admitted for evaluation of new onset seizures. When the doctor told her she might have a brain tumor, she signed a DNR form. Fortunately, no tumor was found and her prognosis was actually quite good. The trauma team finds no life-threatening injuries from her fall and expects her to begin psychiatric treatments before she leaves the hospital. This additional information generally would make people glad that you decided to go ahead with the treatment. More laws and regulations are being passed, allowing pre-hospital to withhold certain treatments when the patient has a DNR order. Valid order consists of a written statement describing the interventions a particular patient does not wish to have, that is recognized by the authorities of the state. Before following a DNR order, the paramedic must be aware of several things. First, we got to know the order must meet state and local requirements regarding wording and witnesses. Generally, there's a standardized form. There has to be a time limit in certain jurisdictions. Patient with a valid DNR may be required to wear or have nearby a particular means of identification, like a life alert bracelet that says DNR, or I believe one of the state regulations in Kansas, if I recall correctly, is the DNR order must be placed in a very conspicuous location, generally by the bed, on an end table, or posted on the wall next to the head of the bed. There should be a clear description of what interventions are to be withheld and under which circumstances. And finally, they are still entitled to reasonable measures intended to make the patient more comfortable or delivering comfort care. The family and loved ones are entitled to emotional support from EMS providers. We spoke about that. That is something that we're there for. We're there to be support for the family if need be. With as much time as we spend learning how to, I'm going to get caught up on the clickers here. If we're ever in doubt, go ahead with the resuscitation. Once you have verified the validity of an order and identified and identity of the patient, you are obligated ethically, perhaps and possibly legally, to cease resuscitation efforts at that time. Ultimately, always follow your local protocols. That takes a lot of the onus off of you and places it onto the local service, medical direction. Getting back to what I was saying just a little bit ago, we spend so much time learning how to fix people. Let's just call it, let's just put it on the simplest terms possible. We spend so much time learning skills and education and medicines and procedures and everything to fix everything under the sun that we want. That's what we want to do. That's what we're here for. That's why we decided to become what we've decided. That's why we decided to become paramedics. We want to help. We want to do these things. Sometimes people are tired. They're tired of fighting. They're tired of, they don't want these things done to their body. It takes them so long to heal when they during the recovery process. They've led good lives. They're ready. When their body finally gives, they are ready. They've made their peace. However it helps you get by, this is what they want. That's why they have the DNR, or they're terminal and they know that the prognosis is not good and they're just going to continue to decline, and they just don't want to prolong that any longer than possible. That's their right. That's their decision. May it go against everything we've been trained to do and have been taught to do, and we've dedicated our lives to doing, but in the end, that's their choice, and that's what we have to honor. So as we move on, let's talk about confidentiality. We are obligated to the patient to maintain confidential information: their name, their date of birth, their medical history, and what has happened, why we were called. We are not there to broadcast their news all over the neighborhood. That's their job if they choose to do it. Our job is to go in, help them in every way we possibly can within our scope of practice, within our protocols, and within the laws and regulations that govern what we do, and take them to the definitive care if that's what is required, and pass off what information we know to people in direct care of the patient once they get to the hospital or the emergency room or wherever it is where we're taking them. And then that's then confidentiality kicks in. We write our reports. We do not tell the public about this. We don't go on Facebook and say, hey, we were just at Janet's house at blah, 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 Mockingbird Lane, and, she just slipped off the ladder because she was wearing flip-flops instead of shoes, and she broke her hip. Good job, Janet. No, we don't say anything to anybody about it. We go about our day. We write our report. We prepare for the next call. However, there are some things that we do have to report, but it is a confidential reporting. We're telling the authorities that need to know this, and leaving it at that. So some of these things are births, deaths, particular infectious diseases. Tuberculosis is a big one. Mumps, measles, rubella. Most of the things that we vaccinate against are need to be reported. We do not need we need to stop counting on the emergency rooms to report this stuff. We need to report it. It needs to go all the way up. It needs to be reported by everybody involved, including the hospital and including the EMS services. Now, child abuse and neglect is a mandatory report, and elder neglect and abuse is also a mandatory reporting. We need to get these people the help, all the help that we can get. The kids, the elderly. We need to advocate. They are our patient. We need to advocate for them, and one of the best ways we can do that is reporting. Just because we report it doesn't mean it's true. It means we suspect it. There will be an investigation. We owe it to our patients to give them that opportunity. Valid court order. The only way we breach confidentiality is if we have a valid court order. Or a subpoena for legal use. There is a clear threat by the patient to a specific person. The probability of harm, the magnitude of expected harm, and alternative methods of avoiding harm. Consent. A competent patient of legal age has a fundamental right to decide what healthcare he will receive and will not receive. They have autonomy. They have a choice. It is on us to give them the benefits and the risks of said treatments and procedures, and it is to inform them so they can make the best decision for themselves as possible, whether they want it to or not. And then we follow the doctrine of implied consent when the patient is unable to give consent for themselves. So if they are unresponsive or laying in the middle of the road, no family, nobody's around, other than a bystander that happened to see this person go down or saw them laying on the ground, we cannot get consent, so we go under implied consent that any reasonable person in the same condition would want treatment and want helped as much as possible. When we go into allocation of resources, so we talk about triage. Civilian triage, the most seriously injured receive the most care based on need. Military triage is to help the least seriously injured, produces the greatest number of soldiers who can return to duty. Because that's their focus. Their focus is to put people back in the, fingers on triggers and get them back out there. Whereas civilian is, we're there to fix what needs to be fixed, and the rest will be repaired in due time. And then to resolve the issue of allocation of scarce resources, let's look at what's going on in light of what circumstances caused this this problem. We don't usually we're not usually the ones that are stuck making these decisions, or we don't like to think of ourselves as we only have so much that we can do. So we need to do the best for the most that we can. It doesn't always happen. This is mostly your mass casualty, your plane crashes, your building collapses, that kind of thing. The most obvious example, like I said, is an MCI. There are several approaches to consider when giving out scarce resources. Patients could all receive the same amount of attention and resources, or they could receive resources based on needs, or could receive what someone has determined that they have earned. When we go over the civilian method of triage, we tend to push the walking wounded and those guys off to the side because they can wait. They're not hurt that bad. Or use them to assist on the little bit more critically injured patients while we focus our attention on the worst of the worst. And treat who we can to the best that we can. The military triage, again, is if you can walk to me to be fixed, I'm going to fix you first, and I'm going to kick you back out so you can get back out there and put your finger back on the trigger and go back to work. That's just how it works. If there's important dignitaries in town, if the president or vice president, like when they came out to Greensburg for the tornado and President Bush was there is a medical team dedicated specifically for him. Should anything else have happened, he will get priority treatment over anybody else. It's not, the ambulance and the crew is not used for anybody else. It is strictly there for their own, because he is the most powerful person in the United States and the world, arguably, and the order of care has changed. There is some controversy over whether celebrities should be treated in this way as well. Personally, I think they're the same as anybody else. They're no more important than you or I, so they get treated in line like everybody else. They're no more important. Realistically, I don't think than anybody else, but that is my own personal opinion. Everybody thinks something different. Again, if you fall back on most agencies, I believe, around in Western Kansas are not going to have special contingency plans in case a celebrity is in town, or if there's a dignitary in town, that contingency has already been taken care of by somebody else above even our local people. So it's not even something that we need to really worry about, I don't believe. But just to know that exists. We are obligated to provide care to those who need, without regard to their ability to pay. We've discussed this before. We're going to hit it many, many, many times throughout the next year. It's not our job to decide if they can pay or if they have the right insurance or not. Our job is to fix them or to patch them up to where we can get them to where they're going to be fixed. That's our job. That's how it works. End of story. We act in the patient's best interest, even when it's against the HMO's economic interest. That's the hospital. They can deal with that side of things. They can deal with billing and deciding if the patient's getting treated properly or within their ability to pay or what have you. That's somebody else's decision. It's not ours. Sorry, I'm refilling my cup with Monster. Good Samaritan statutes exist in every state. Many of our hospitals are and do have charity that a patient can apply for to help deal with inability to pay, or there's charity organizations. It would help us if we knew these and we could pass this information on to our patients when they're concerned about pay. This gives them an option and an avenue to follow. Into teaching, many paramedics act as preceptors or mentors in the EMS system. We need them to not only be we need them to be good stewards. We need them to be we need you to be good stewards. We need you to act as preceptors. Your job as a preceptor is to ensure that the education and the skills are being applied properly, and mentoring them and bringing them up in the system in the code of ethics that has been adopted by your service and by EMS, and act like it's accordingly. The patients need to be informed that they are in the presence of a student. They have the right to refuse treatment from a student as well. So requesting their consent before the student performs a procedure, and assessing the student's skill level. They're going to all your preceptors are going to look at you, and you're going to be put through skills tests. I have no doubt, especially if you're at Finney County. I believe Ford County is going to do the same thing. They will put you through a test that they may have developed on their own. That's their thing, and they're going to rate where you are, what your skill level is, and that may decide on where you start and where they start introducing you into doing skills in the field as to how difficult the procedure is and the importance of the procedure to the patient at the time. As a healthcare professional, the paramedic answers to the patient. As a physician's extender, or as a physician extender, because if you look at it like this, we are the eyes and ears of the physician, and we are operating under their license per their standing orders and protocols. So we also answer to our medical director. And as an employee or a volunteer, we answer to our EMS system, our local EMS system. We have many masters. We are servant to 3 masters. And our code of ethics helps make all 3 of them happy. It doesn't always work. Somebody's generally going to be unhappy at some point, but that's just nature of the beast, especially with 3 masters. If the physician orders something the paramedic believes is contraindicated, it is our duty as patient advocates to advocate for our patient and say, I do not believe I believe this is contraindicated, and to verify the order. If they order something that's acceptable, medically acceptable, but it's not in the patient's best interest, say you've got a patient that's relatively stable, you've made multiple attempts at IV, the patient is upset, they are in pain, they're crying due to the multiple IV sticks, they don't want anymore, they're refusing anymore, but the physician orders you to continue attempting IV attempts. It's not in your patient's best interest. If you continue, you're not really advocating for your patient. It's your job to transmit to the physician to clarify and to make them aware of that your patient, whether they are, you've got to decide, are you going to continue trying or are you going to advocate for your patient? Either way, do they really need this before you get to the hospital? Is there going to be a medication that's going to be given right away that's going to relieve what's going on, or is there something that's going to wait for, or what is the case? There's so much that goes on with that. And then the third is the paramedic orders something that is acceptable but morally wrong. You are ordered to stop CPR on a young male. found in cardiac arrest after a blunt trauma. His initial rhythm of asystole has remained unchanged. You know that it's almost always associated with death. Nevertheless, although there's very slim chance of recovery for the patient, you continue resuscitation efforts. You would not be able to live with yourself if you didn't at least try. So you're ordered to stop CPR on a traumatic arrest, even though our training and experience has told us that traumatic arrests very seldom come out well. We just continue. We go ahead and go against medical advice, and we continue. Confirm the order. And remember, morals is based on you, the individual, while ethics applies to the broader spectrum. Do what's right. Do what you know is right. Are we giving... are we doing the right thing for the patient and the family if we continue on any of these things? These are open questions. We're not answering them. They're open. Because there's not enough information given to us to make that decision. It's just enough to get you to think about it. Ultimately, we must determine what's in the patient's best interests. We have to document it. We have to document why. It is important for us to understand that no matter what decision he makes, we will have to defend it. So we decided to continue CPR. Why did we decide to continue CPR? We were told not to. We know that a cardiac arrest or traumatic arrest is generally unsurvivable. We know this, and yet we continued. We poked a patient 15 times to get an IV for whatever reason, because the doctor ordered us to continue. Did they really need the IV that bad? Was there a medication that we were going to give that was going to ultimately outweigh the 15 different IV pokes or the breaks in the skin, the pain inflicted, the emotional effect of that on the patient? I mean, that's to be stuck with an IV 15 times. I don't know where somebody would not consider that to be almost torture. It doesn't happen often, but they do happen from time to time where you have a disagreement with the physician with their orders. But we have to defend our action. If we side with the physician, we need to say why we decided to side with the physician. If we decided to go against medical direction, why? Why did we go against medical direction in this instance? Then when we enter into research, it's a whole nother area. We implement research protocols and we gather the data. Again, documentation got documentation. We have got to make sure that all the data is as factual as we can make it. It has to be completely factual, because otherwise it's not research. It's opinion. Research is what all things are built on, including medicine. Helps us innovate, helps us find newer treatments. They research things that may work for us. They plan the experiment, and they go out and they do the research on they set up a protocol. They find a service that will implement these protocols and decide whether this is going to work. A lot of this is military in nature that we've, especially what's come around lately, especially in trauma interventions. But we also need to gain the patient's expressed consent to be within the study. And like I said, there are sometimes little wristbands that are given. That way, the patient knows they've already been informed, and they've already as to what the things are, and they have opted out of the research. So you do not put the research protocol in place on that patient. You go with the old protocol that deals with that specific situation. As a paramedic, you will learn to make ethical decisions that will have an effect on you, could have an effect on you, your career, your family, ultimately, depending on how large of a decision or how important the decision is. It will definitely affect your patient or their families or others. The decision making process should always be based on the patient's best interests. They include more than life-saving procedures, as we talked about with, like, say, the IV sticks, with stuff like that. Cultural sensitivity should be included in the decision, depending on what that culture's like. I mean, you may need to do some research on the cultural diversity of your local service. Every patient has autonomy. Every adult patient of legal age, they have the right to determine what happens to their body, and they can legally dictate that. And we don't have the right to go against it. Clear distinction. Remember, there is a clear distinction between ethics, religion, law, even though there is some common ground between the three. And your action every action that you do should be legal and within your scope of practice. They should be helpful. They should not do any harm and direct wishes of the patient.